Ooh, we got a bit of a new framing situation going on here. Yeah, I'm testing out a new recording setup, not for the main channel, but for other stuff, and hopefully it works. Hello! Welcome to Technology Connextras. I'm making this video kind of as a follow-up to the video I just did on the main channel on power versus energy, but to be honest, this video is mainly about renewable energy and my astonishment that the investment angle is just not landing on people. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but first I want to address, I got some feedback that I was a little too cranky in the power versus energy video, and I'll cop to that. My brain is a little bit frazzled due to all the everything, and it may have leaked out my frustration, may have leaked out a little more than it should have, but this is truly a thing a lot of people either don't understand or just confuse very easily. Even in like the responses to social media posts about the video, people saw the thumbnail and they're like, what's he talking about? Watts are how we measure energy. No, it is not how we measure energy. And even like journalists that report on renewable energy infrastructure, they'll say, ooh, there's a new battery capacity or battery bank going on the grid which can store 2 gigawatts of power. That means nothing. And it's very frustrating that people that are in this professional sphere don't know the difference between power and energy. So like, truly, this is something that needs more focus. It's not taught very, I'm sure I was taught this in high school physics, but a lot of people don't retain what they're taught in school, so they need reminders about it. And I find thinking about energy to be really, really cool because energy is how your life happens. And why wouldn't you want to know more about that? But transitioning to what this follow-up is really about, when I was a kid, it was explained to me by my family, by school, and I'm talking like elementary school through college, that when it comes to spending your money, if you can spend a little more up front to save more later, then that's going to save you money in the long run. Like, this is a very basic financial reality that I think most people understand. And yet, when we talk about energy resources, for some reason, renewable energy is this weird black hole where that logic breaks. Because setting aside all of the reasons why people might want to transition to renewable energy over fossil fuels, a really big one is the fact that the sun and the wind don't cost anything. Now, of course, managing renewable energy is more difficult because it's not what's called dispatchable. You have to wait for the sun to shine in order to harvest that energy. But if people can understand that it is a harvest of a thing which is free, then you would think, right, that that's going to be the obvious better technology. Because if we don't have to spend any effort getting energy because the sun just shines and the wind just blows, wouldn't it be wiser to try to figure out how to store that energy so we can use it when the sun isn't shining or the wind's not blowing? That's what we're trying to do here, folks. Now, side note, I am not interested in having a discussion where we pit nuclear energy against wind and solar energy. I normally don't talk about nuclear that much, mainly because I'm engaged with the political realities of it. We are looking at a landscape where solar energy and battery storage especially are growing exponentially, and nuclear power just isn't. And if you believe that we really need to transition away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible, trying to say we should be focusing on nuclear instead doesn't feel like a wise angle to me. And again, it's not, nobody should be saying this as an instead. By talking about wind and solar energy, I'm not saying, oh, nuclear is bad. I'm just not talking about nuclear. I personally would welcome more. I live in Illinois where we've got a lot of it, but I would welcome more. I would never vote against it. And if it were to come up on my ballot to approve a nuclear power station a mile away from my house, I would absolutely vote for it. But that doesn't change the reality that a lot of people wouldn't. And solar panels are something that you can just buy. You can go to Harbor Freight and buy them. I mean, they're probably not the best solar panels out there, but we are manufacturing them very, 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 very fast. And it's just a thing that you can buy. And you can slap it on your rooftop and you can harvest energy for free. So that's the main reason why I tend to be focused on wind and solar, because it just seems far more possible, both on a societal level and an individual level. And I've talked before about my issues with connecting solar to the grid and how we reimburse people for that, so I don't need to go down that road. But I just wanted to explain there's a lot of tension between people who promote solar and wind and people who think we should be doing nuclear instead. And I don't think it is an instead, it's an and. They can work together, they should work, they are working together. And the thing is just we are seeing scaling happen extremely quickly with solar and batteries. And I want to press on that and encourage that because there's no reason to slow it down. And then going back to the thing that it's kind of like, I don't really know why this doesn't just click for everybody. It is correct that solar panels take resources to manufacture, and batteries especially require very tricky minerals that we probably need to stop getting for many reasons. However, all of the fossil fuels that we use, we set fire to. When the battery pack in my car, when it wears out, which probably will not happen for at least a decade, all of the minerals are still in its battery pack. We don't have to find them again to make a new battery pack. We can grind it up and purify it into a new battery pack. That is a thing which is already beginning to happen. The same thing's going to happen with solar panels. And actually, the bulk of the mass in solar panels is just aluminum and glass. It's not the silicon wafers that build it up or that actually harvest the energy. It's just the physical thing which is holding those wafers. And that's why, to me, it's like every single person who's making an argument about, well, what about the impact of mining all those materials? We're not dismissing that, but like, what about the impact of all the fossil fuels that we're constantly extracting? This is a conversation where people are like, well, but that's just how we've always done it. And it's easy to see a new reality. It's easy to paint a new reality as being really, really difficult and really, really tricky when, to me, it's just like, we all know this, but we also understand that the thing's going to produce energy for at least 20 years. The battery's going to be able to store and release energy for at least a decade. And not only, and this is the reality of what we have today, we're getting better at making solar panels, we're getting better at making batteries. Lithium iron phosphate is an amazing battery chemistry. The nickel and manganese and the cobalt that's in the nickel, manganese, cobalt in my car's battery pack, none of that is in a lithium iron phosphate battery cell. So while LFP has some operational downsides compared to nickel, manganese, cobalt, the only really precious material in it is lithium, which is not even that precious. And again, it's still in the battery pack when it dies. Every fossil fuel you have ever used is now in the atmosphere, which is a problem. I don't know if you've heard, but it's a problem. But even like setting aside the externalities there, why would you stand for a technology which is setting fire to stuff? Meaning you have to constantly get more of the stuff to set fire to. It's literally burning money, right? If it costs energy or if it costs money to pay people to obtain fossil fuels, and then we set those fossil fuels on fire, it's burning money. I had a professor in college who talked about, he was a purchasing professor in one of my hospitality classes, and he was talking about inventory control for your restaurant. And he was basically saying, like, there's money in your walk-in fridge. It just looks like lettuce. And so there's money in that natural gas that we're sending to a power plant, and we're setting it on fire. Why wouldn't you want to spend your money on a thing, an object, that's going to sit there and just dutifully do its job for 10 to 20 years, and then maybe 20 years from now, you're going to have to replace the panels. Maybe 10 years from now, you're going to have to replace the batteries. But you had 10 or 20 years of not setting fire to money. And you can already do, you can do the math and figure this out for yourself, right? This is the main reason why I want people to be thinking about energy. Because when people just consume energy from the power grid without thinking about it, and they don't contextualize like how much of that resource am I actually using, and what other ways could I do that, then they're not going to be curious about what resources, what alternative resources would be required to do your thing. So I'll give you an example. My car, right? I don't drive very much because my commute from my home to here is only about 20 minutes round trip.
Miles, not minutes.
So, we'll grant that. But I drive typically 140-ish miles, give or take a bit, every week, depending on what errands I'm doing. And that requires about 40 kilowatt hours. Now, if we divide that by the 24 hours a day and the 7 days in a week, that means the average power draw of my car is not even 300 watts, right? That's it. And, so the average commute, if you want to consider the average commute being about twice as what I do, then the average EV would need probably about a 500 watt constant draw. And how many solar panels do you need to produce 500 watts of power? 2. Now, yes, I know power is not energy, but what I'm getting at is if you have a capacity factor of like just 25% with a solar panel, then you're going to need maybe 10 of those solar panels to enable a car to do the typical American commute. So even the least efficient way to travel needs 10 solar panels to power it. And because an electric car has a battery, like if it were able to be plugged into the grid when the sun was shining, then, well, there you go. It's like, there's energy storage right there. And, the more you think about energy, the more you're going to realize that like my car's 70 kilowatt hour battery, which exists because it's a car. I didn't buy that battery thinking I'm going to use it as an energy storage device. I bought it because it's a car. That 70 kilowatt hours of energy storage is huge. And if there were a way to just be able to offload it, and there is, as those of you who may already know, I can offload power from my car in a limited way, but I can use it as an emergency generator, then I have access to a ton of energy that I can use if I need to. So really, I just, so much of this conversation is what is familiar versus what is new. You don't think about all the effort it takes to get oil out of the ground and refine it into gasoline, which then you put into a car. Like, that just happens. That's not something you have to think about. But because you're not thinking about it, you're not realizing that every single gallon of gas you've ever put in a car is gone. So yeah, it took way more resources to build the battery pack for my car than it does to build, to create a gas tank's worth of gas. But that resource just stays with the car for its entire life. And it's an energy storage device. It's not an energy source itself. That is what I think is really cool to think about, but first and foremost, people need to think about it. I find it really quite sad, to be honest, that more people aren't playing around with the possibilities here. When I had just started my first job, I used to have this dream of building what I called the solar barn. And it would basically be buy a plot of land in the country, put up a steel building, and inside like one corner of the steel building, build an apartment that you could live in. And I wanted to do that completely off grid. And I was running the numbers to see how many panels would I need to buy, how much would that cost, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't remember these numbers offhand, but back in 2013, I remember coming up to it would cost about $30,000 to install a massive off-grid system to have that building function entirely off-grid with all the modern amenities you could want. And back then, we were talking about forklift batteries. Used to be a pretty popular way to do off-grid setups because they're deep cycle lead acid batteries and they're enormous. So you could, I don't remember how much energy they would store, but we were talking about get a couple of these forklift batteries and they could sustain your typical needs in a home for several days. So I remember I had come to this number, which was around like $30,000. And then when you compare it to the cost of building a building anywhere, that's not adding much to the cost. And, when you consider that my power bills for my home, about $100 a month, in 30 years, I'm going to spend more than $30,000. And for sure, if I had hooked up this solar barn to the grid, my power bills would be much higher than that. So that's just, the sort of stuff that I'm talking about. If you can play around with energy storage, how much energy you can get from a typical solar array, where you live over the year, and you can have fun with this. Back then, I'm not even sure I was aware of heat pumps, to be honest, and I was probably counting on resistive electric heat and doing tons of insulation, and then having propane on site as an emergency backup. And I don't know. I mean, to me, we have this weird situation right now where we've got so many more tools than we have ever had, and yet a lot of people are in very all or nothing mindsets, very this versus that, or solar energy is hard. Why would we do it? And I'm just sitting here like, the great thing about solar energy and wind is that it's free. Like, of course, it's not literally free, but it's almost like the thing that I'm thinking of it is like, imagine the year is 1999 and you see digital cameras on the horizon. You are Kodak. You are being the company that realizes, wow, this new technology doesn't require people to buy film just to take pictures. We better make sure people don't get too interested in this technology. Like, that's who you're being. As you accuse me of being a green energy propagandist, you are absolutely listening to oil industry propaganda if you truly believe that film cameras, we should just still have to pay 25 cents or whatever for every picture we take, rather than spend $1,000 on a camera which can take pictures forever for free. Like, it's not forever, but like, that's the analogy that I want to make here, right? Digital cameras, new and expensive. Back then, it might have seemed rational to just keep on buying film. But of course now, film is just for hobbyists. And I really hope we are not too long away from a future where setting fire to stuff to live our lives is just not a thing we have to do anymore. And by the way, one thing that I haven't even touched on, there's a storm coming in now, that's fun, is that the one of the ways where the financial system is like truly just getting in our way is that we've created these energy markets which create these minute-by-minute prices on the power grid. I'm signed up for that via ComEd. That's how I do my hourly rate. I'm paid the wholesale price, or I pay the wholesale price for electricity, which means that overnight it's dirt cheap, but sometimes in the afternoons it can be very, very expensive. Those pricing signals that we created for the market are going to become a problem for solar energy because solar energy is free. Like, the people who build solar farms can sell their energy for less than literally anybody else. So we have this race to the bottom thing going on where solar energy ends up being too cheap And one way we can solve it is that new solar projects are going to have battery storage. That way they can sell their energy after the sun sets, which is likely the most straightforward and simple way to manage this. But like, it's really frustrating when we are running into these systems that we've created that are like, well, the more solar we put on the grid, the more difficult it is to make money from solar. Whereas it's like, you mean we're making it difficult to sell a free thing in this capitalist environment? What's happening? So there's a lot of stuff that's truly just, a lot of these barriers to solar energy are, I call them fake, because they're systems that we have set up. The one true big barrier to getting more solar on the grid right now, especially big grid scale solar projects, is the fact that you have to connect wires from those sites to the rest of the grid. And there's big interconnection queues, which are stupid, and our current environment probably means we're not going to try that hard to get through them. But this is what I mean. Like, there's this technology that we have, right? That you put in a field, the sun shines on it, and it makes free energy. And we've got these weird systems in place that are making that difficult. Chip away at those systems, people. Come on. If we have created a structure which makes free energy hard, we need to destroy that structure. Yeah, how's that for a spicy thought? Because the opportunity for grid scale solar energy is gangbusters. If you do the math and people have figured out, if we can install a 100 watt or 100 megawatt solar array that's going to generate 600 megawatt hours of energy every your average day, right? And there's this race to the bottom condition because it's too cheap to sell that energy when the sun is shining. What are we doing here, folks? Like, what are we doing here? That's competition hurting us rather than helping us. So I'm not an expert in those sorts of energy policy stuff, so I don't want you to like really take my word for it. But like, I don't know, if I could open a lemonade, if I had a tap that just lemonade fell out of it, I would try to open a lemonade stand. You know, it's like, so if you have a solar farm and the sun is just falling on it, creating energy, and for some reason the market makes it that you could barely make any money from that, what are we doing? Probably, if you're watching this video, I'm preaching to the choir, but you know, the more, if you talk to people, like if there's people in your life who are skeptical about this, maybe try to make this argument to them that you are prioritizing familiar but expensive over difficult but cheap. And I thought, as humans, we wanted to make our lives better, and hard work was a good thing. So yeah, I'll stop talking now. There's a storm coming through. That's fun. But thanks for watching. Hope some interesting thoughts came out of this. And yeah, like, just we need more people to be thinking in long term, thinking about upfront investments, unlocking long-term savings, and investments in not just literally financial money, but also effort, you know? Anyway, thanks for watching. Let's try to make the world better and think a little harder.